Many important guests in the room this morning, but I think it's important to point out that with us are many family members of citizens who were subject to human radiation experiment and some of the advocates who represent them. Their presence signifies that this administration's commitment to meeting our obligations of power, our willingness to share information, to respect the right of people to know the facts, the responsibility to limit secrecy, and that which is truly essential, and that is to make those who were wronged and harmed whole. When President Clinton came to Washington, he was dedicated to the task of rebuilding the relationship of trust between the citizens and its government. This advisory committee report, the President's response, and the actions he will direct many of us to take today are all evidence of our commitment and his commitment to rebuild the trust with the American people. Why did we do this? Why did the President direct his administration to open the doors on human radiation experiments? I believe that this openness puts us in a position as a nation to close many chapters of the Cold War, just as the President did by ending nuclear weapons testing for the United States, as the United States and Russia did in pointing our missiles away from each other, and in dismantling warheads and extending the NPT. And today, another step of that openness is coming clean on the human radiation experience. When the President appointed the advisory committee, he committed our whole government to a massive record search, which included some 840,000 pages and the declassification of some 3,020 documents. And we've made available to the American people these government records because they strike at the heart of the relationship between the American people and their government, and whether the government misused individual citizens. The President committed to do this without knowing where it would lead or whether the records would reveal government mistakes, cause embarrassments, or lawsuits. He did this because he believed that it was the right thing to do. Today, the President receives from Dr. Faden and her colleagues on the President's Advisory Committee a report that tells the story of radiation experiments involving human subjects funded by the government. We did not realize when we began this journey the difficulty of the charge given these citizens. Eminent ethicists, physicians, scientists, citizens, even lawyers. For the past 18 months, the advisory committee members and their staff have devoted much of their lives to this investigation. They sacrificed their weekends, their vacations, and late hours. And in the end, for the committee, their actual working days to review the documents going back for decades. Today, they give us their best judgment as to whether persons were wronged. The nation owes to them, to their families, and to all the staffs that have worked on this issue, the generous gratitude for their public service, and most importantly, for the recommendations which the President will receive shortly. And most of all, we owe a gracious thanks to the family members who are here. Dr. Faden.
Mr. President, Secretary O'Leary, Attorney General Reno, Secretary Shalala, other members of the Human Radiation Interagency Working Group, on behalf of my 13 colleagues on the Advisory Committee, I am proud to submit our final report. We worked extremely hard over the last 18 months in order to inform you and the American people about what really happened to radiation research subjects in the Cold War period. With the assistance of federal agencies, private research centers and hospitals, and numerous citizens, we have assembled and reviewed hundreds of thousands of documents, many of which were previously secret. In 31 days of open hearings conducted in Washington and throughout the country, we have heard from hundreds of public witnesses. We have found that wrongs were indeed committed, both with experiments involving radiation and with intentional releases of radiation into the environment. In the pursuit of peace and the advancement of medicine, certainly two laudable goals, the rights and interests of individuals and communities were sometimes ignored. We found that government officials and physicians who had the trust of the public and of their patients abused that trust. Patients were used as subjects of experiments without their knowledge or consent. Information was withheld from affected communities and from the public. Secrets were kept to protect the government from embarrassment and legal liability. While the radiation doses in the experiments we studied were usually low, and officials and scientists were often concerned about risk, we do not believe that excuses the wrongs that were done. We urge you to do the right thing by those who have been wronged or harmed by these events. In our report, we recommend for your consideration guidelines for compensating former subjects. But if we are to keep faith with those who have suffered, we must all do more. Your extraordinary efforts have allowed the American people to learn about a piece of our history that we could not otherwise have understood. You have opened the doors of this nation's records, and they must stay open. You have recognized the price of secrecy in research for what it is, a legacy of cynicism and a legacy of distrust. If we are to keep faith with those who have suffered, we must do everything possible to guarantee that what happened to them never happens again. The committee learned that research safeguards have come a long way since the Second World War. Americans can and should feel much more secure about medical research today, but the system remains imperfect. I urge you to carefully review the committee's findings and recommendations. Both the government and research institutions must do all they can to protect our fellow citizens. If this committee's work is to mean anything, it has to be that 50 years from now, there does not have to be another presidential committee charged with investigating allegations of abuses of human subjects. There should never be another such advisory committee. Information must not be concealed again from people in their own time, so that it takes 2 generations for the truth to come out. Mr. President, your leadership in this area has been indispensable. Without your willingness to open government files to our scrutiny, our work would have been totally impossible. We could not have done it. Your staff, your cabinet and agency heads and their staffs have been supportive at every turn. We have had every request met, but always with great respect for our independence. You've set a new standard for open government in an area that has been largely secret for 50 years. We on the committee are both honored and grateful that you have taken our work so seriously. I hope that we have met the challenge that you put before us 18 months ago. On behalf of the committee and of our staff, thank you for this extraordinary opportunity to serve our nation. It has been a true privilege.
Committee members, please stand. Let's give them all a hand. They did an extraordinary job. Let me begin with a simple thank you to everyone who participated in this extraordinary project, and to everyone who supported them. I am especially glad to see here today Senator Glenn, who's been so active in working on the medical ethics issue, Congressman Markey, who's worked on this issue for a very long time, Congressman Frost, Secretary Shalala, Deputy Secretary of Veterans Affairs Herschel Gober, and of course the Attorney General, who basically tries to get us all to do the right thing all the time. I want to thank Secretary O'Leary for her extraordinary devotion to this cause. And you heard in her remarks basically the way that she views this. It's a part of her ongoing commitment to finish the end of the Cold War. And perhaps no energy secretary has ever done as much as she has to be an advocate, whether it is for continued reforms within the Energy Department or her outspoken endorsement of the strongest possible commitment on the part of the United States to a comprehensive test ban treaty, which I believe we will achieve next year, in no small measure thanks to the support of the Secretary of Energy. And of course, I want to thank Dr. Ruth Faden for her extraordinary commitment of about a year and a half of her life to this unusual but important task. And all of you who served on the committee, I remember the first time we put this committee together, I looked, I said, that's a pretty distinguished outfit. I wish I could give them 5 or 6 jobs to do.
Thank you.
I'll expect you back next Monday, and then we'll... I do thank you so much for the work you have done. Let me tell you that just as this is an important part of the efforts that Secretary O'Leary outlined, I saw this committee as an indispensable part of our effort to restore the confidence of the American people in the integrity of their government. All of these political reform issues, to me, are integrated. When I became the president, I realized we had great new economic challenges, we had profound social problems, that a lot of these things had to be done by an energized American citizenry, but that our national government had a role to play in moving our country through this period of transition. And in order to do it, we needed to increase the capacity of the government to do it through political reform, but we also needed, as much as anything else, to increase the confidence of the American people that at the very least they could trust the United States government to tell the truth and to do the right things. So you have to understand that for me, one reason this is so important is that I see it as part of our ongoing effort to give this government back to the American people. Senator Glenn's long effort to get Congress to apply to itself the same laws it imposes on the private sector. The restrictions that I imposed on members of my administration in high positions for lobbying for foreign governments, and when the lobby bill failed in the Congress, I just imposed it by executive order on members of the executive branch. All these efforts at political reform, it seems to me, are important. But none of these efforts can succeed unless people believe that they can rely on their government to tell them the truth and to do the right thing. We have declassified thousands of government documents, files from the Second World War, the Cold War, President Kennedy's assassination. These actions are not only consistent with our national security, they are essential to advance our values. So, to me, that's what this is all about. And to all those who represent the families who have been involved in these incidents, let me say to you, I hope you feel that your government has kept its commitment to the American people to tell the truth and to do the right thing. We discovered soon after I entered office that with the specter of an atomic war looming like Armageddon, far nearer than it does today, the United States government actually did carry out on our citizens experiments involving radiation. That's when I ordered the creation of this committee. Dr. Faden and the others did a superb job. They enlisted many of our nation's most significant and important medical and scientific ethicists. They had to determine first whether experiments conducted or sponsored by our government between 1944 and 1974 met the ethical and scientific standards of that time and of our time. And then they had to see to it that our research today lives up to nothing less than our highest values and our most deeply held beliefs. From the beginning, it was obvious to me that this energetic committee was prepared to do its part. We declassified thousands of pages of documents. We gave committee members the keys to the government's doors, file cabinets, and safes. For the last year and a half, the only thing that stood between them and the truth were all the late nights and hard work they had to put in. This report I received today is a monumental document in more ways than one. But it is a very, very important piece of America's history, and it will shape America's future in ways that will make us a more honorable, more successful, and more ethical country. What this committee learned, I would like to review today with a little more detail than Dr. Faden said, because I think it must be engraved on our national memory. Thousands of government-sponsored experiments did take place at hospitals, universities, and military bases around our nation. The goal was to understand the effects of radiation exposure on the human body. While most of the tests were ethical by any standards, some were unethical, not only by today's standards, but by the standards of the time in which they were conducted. They failed both the test of our national values and the test of humanity. In one scientist injected plutonium into 18 patients without their knowledge. In another, doctors exposed indigent cancer patients to excessive doses of radiation, a treatment from which it is virtually impossible that they could ever benefit. The report also demonstrates that these and other experiments were carried out on precisely those citizens who count most on the government for its help, the destitute and the gravely ill. But the dispossessed were not alone. Members of the military, precisely those on whom we and our government count most, they were also test subjects. Informed consent means your doctor tells you the risk of the treatment you are about to undergo. In too many cases, informed consent was withheld. Americans were kept in the dark about the effects of what was being done to them. The deception extended beyond the test subjects themselves to encompass their families and the American people as a whole. For these experiments were kept secret, and they were shrouded not for a compelling reason of national security, but for the simple fear of embarrassment, and that was wrong. Those who led the government when these decisions were made are no longer here to take responsibility for what they did. They're not here to apologize to the survivors, the family members of the communities whose lives were darkened by the shadow of the atom and these choices. So today, on behalf of another generation of American leaders and another generation of American citizens, the United States of America offers a sincere apology to those of our citizens who were subjected to these experiments, to their families, and to their communities. When the government does wrong, we have a moral responsibility to admit it. The duty we owe to one another to tell the truth and to protect our fellow citizens from excesses like these is one we can never walk away from. Our government failed in that duty, and it offers an apology to the survivors and their families, and to all the American people who must be able to rely upon the United States to keep its word, to tell the truth, and to do the right thing. We know there are moments when words alone are not enough. That's why I'm instructing my cabinet to use and build on these recommendations, to devise promptly a system of relief, including compensation that meets the standards of justice and conscience. When called for, we will work with Congress to serve the best needs of those who were harmed. Make no mistake, as the committee report says, there are circumstances where compensation is appropriate as a matter of ethics and principle. I am committed to seeing to it that the United States of America lives up to its responsibility. Our greatness is measured not only in how we so frequently do right, but also how we act when we know we've done the wrong thing, how we confront our mistakes, make our apologies, and take action. That's why this morning I signed an executive order instructing every arm and agency of our government that conducts, supports, or regulates research involving human beings to review immediately their procedures in light of the recommendations of this report and the best knowledge and standards available today, and to report back to me by Christmas. I've also created a Bioethics Advisory Commission to supervise the process, to watch over all such research, and to see to it that never again do we stray from the basic values of protecting our people and being straight with them. The report I received today will not be left on a shelf to gather dust. Every one of its pages offers a lesson, and every lesson will be learned from these good people who put 1.5 years of their lives into the effort to set America straight. Medical and scientific progress depends upon learning about people's responses to new medicines, to new cutting-edge treatments. Without this kind of research, our children would still be dying from polio and other killers. Without responsible radiation research, we wouldn't be making the progress we are in the war on cancer. We have to continue to research, but there is a right way and a wrong way to do it. There are local citizens review boards. There are regulations that establish proper informed consent and ensure that experiments are conducted ethically. But in overseeing this necessary research, we must never relax our vigilance. The breathtaking advances in science and technology demand that we always keep our ethical watchlight burning. No matter how rapid the pace of change, it can never outrun our core convictions that have stood us so well as a nation for more than 200 years now, through many different scientific revolutions. I believe we will meet the test of our times, that as science and technology evolve, our ethical conscience will grow, not shrink. Informed consent, community right to know, our entire battery of essential human protections, all these grew up in response to the health and humanitarian crises of this 20th century. They are proof that we are equal to our challenges. Science is not ever simply objective. It emerges from the crucible of historical circumstances and personal experience. Let us remember, too, that cynicism about government has roots in historical circumstances. Because of stonewallings and evasions in the past, times when a family member or a neighbor suffered an injustice and had nowhere to turn and couldn't even get the facts, some Americans lost faith in the promise of our democracy. Government was very powerful, but very far away and not trusted to be ethical. So today, by making ourselves accountable for the sins of the past, I hope more than anything else, we are laying the foundation stone for a new era. Good people like these members of Congress who have labored on this issue for a long time and have devoted their careers to trying to do the right thing and having people justifiably feel confidence in the work of their representatives. They will continue to work to see that we implement these recommendations. And under our watch, we will no longer hide the truth from our citizens. We will act as if all that we do will see the light of day. Nothing that happens in Washington will ever be more important in anyone's life affected by these experiments, perhaps, than these reports we issue today. But all of us as Americans will be better off because of the larger lesson we learned in this exercise and because of our continuing effort to demonstrate to our people that we can be faithful to their values. Thank you very much.